Welcome back to MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic. In today's video, we are going to continue our current Build-A-Deck series around Eligeth, Crossroads Augur, and Sakashima of 1,000 Faces. And in this video, we are going to add a very powerful tribe to the 98 of this deck. What's up, MTG That is the MTG Burgeoning community. Welcome back to another episode of our ongoing series as we build a deck around the winning pair of commander partners that you, the MTG Burgeoning community, selected as the champions of the Tournament of Partners. Today we are going to add a very powerful tribe to the 98 of this deck, which will serve as one of our win conditions. Prior to getting into the new stuff, let's quickly review the scry package that we included in the very first episode of this current series. Chain to Memory, Mystic Speculation, Opt, Preordain, Serum Visions, Deliberate, Maze Mind Tome, Omen of the Sea, Scour All Possibilities, Jace Mirror Mage, Mystic Redaction, Retreat to Coral Helm, Behold the Multiverse, Foresee, Tamio's Epiphany, Netherese Puzzle Ward, Graven Lore, Eugen's Insights, and Diviner's Portent. This is a scry package that was included in the deck as a way in which to abuse Eligeth's ability of turning all scry effects into card draw. More on the purposes and power of that scry package to come later in this series. Today, it's all about a tribe, baby. And one of the most powerful tribes that I could think of to put into a mono blue deck, well, we've got one of them as our commander, and it's going to be Sphinxes. We are going to include a package of Sphinxes as a way in which to beat down our opponents through the air. Let's begin with Curator of Mysteries, a 4/4 for 2 and 2 blue. Of course it has flying because it's a Sphinx. And at the beginning, and when we cycle or discard another card, we get to scry 1. And of course, if we have Eligeth in play, that scry 1 will turn into draw 1. There is going to be some additional infinite combo game-winning synergies that we can, well, maybe not infinite, but there are some game-winning combo synergies that we're going to have with Curator of Mysteries later on in the series. Stay tuned to that little piece of foreshadowing. And as an additional effect for Curator of Mysteries, we can pay a blue and cycle this card away. 4/4 flyer for 4 blue mana. Not too bad at all. All right, next Sphinx up, staying with a CMC of 4. This will be our last 4-drop of this video. We have Sphinx of Foresight. It's a 4/4 for 2 and 2 blue. We may reveal this card from our opening hand, and if we do, we scry 3 at the beginning of our first upkeep. Now, this is at the beginning of the game, so unfortunately we will not be able to reap the benefits of turning that scry effect into card draw because Eligeth will still be in our command zone. However, a 4/4 flyer for 4 that at the beginning of our upkeep we get to scry 1, Eligeth will come down and say, why don't you draw that card instead? All right, so we led off with a couple of 4/4 flyers for 4 mana. Now let's bump it up to a mana value of 5 and dial back some of the power as a way in which to better synergize with Eligeth's static ability. Here we have Cloud Reader Sphinx, a 3/4 flyer for 4 and a blue mana. When it ETBs, we scry 2. Of course, Eligeth will say, don't scry that 2. Put those 2 cards into your hand instead. CMC of 5, and the last 5-drop of this set of cards, we have Prognostic Sphinx. 3/5 flyer for 3 and 2 blue mana. We can discard a card, and Prognostic Sphinx gains hexproof until end of turn, and then we tap it. Whenever Prognostic Sphinx attacks, we get to scry 3. And of course, Eligeth will say, instead of scrying those 3 cards, why don't you draw them instead? Prognostic Sphinx is the other part of that combo I was telling you about earlier with Curator of Mysteries. So let's take a look at these two and how they will interact on the battlefield if Eligeth is also in play and under our control. Whenever we discard a card or cycle a card, we get to scry 1. That scry 1 turns into draw a card whenever Eligeth is in play and under our control. We can discard a card just to activate Prognostic Sphinx's ability. It gains hexproof until end of turn, and we can tap it. So we can continuously discard a card to draw a card off of Curator of Mysteries' scry ability, which Eligeth turns into a draw ability. With these 2 cards in play interacting with each other under the direction of our commander, Eligeth Crossroads Augur, we have a way in which to draw our entire library, and as you'll see later on in the series, we have many, many ways to win after doing that. So those are the 2 centerpieces of a combo that we've put into this mono blue deck. All right, jamming on up to a CMC of 6, we have Horizon Scholar. It's a 4/4 flyer, but when it ETBs, we scry 2. So Eligeth will turn that scry effect into drawing 2 cards. And let's also keep in mind that Sakashima of 1,000 Faces over there can come into play as a copy of any of our Sphinxes here, as well as take their enter the battlefield triggers. CMC of 6, if we're talking about Sphinxes and we're looking to draw some cards, you knew it was only a matter of time until we were going to talk about Consecrated Sphinx. 4/6 for 4 and 2 blue. Whenever an opponent draws a card, we may draw 2 cards. So there's not really much outside of the additional card draw that our opponents will enable us to have that's going to really have any effect with any of the dynamics we've talked about in this deck tech so far. But Consecrated Sphinx is just too powerful of a card not to include, particularly if we are adding a Sphinx element to this mono blue commander deck. Staying with a CMC of 6, we have Dream Eater, a 4/3 with flying and flash for 4 and 2 blue mana. When Dream Eater ETBs, we get to surveil 4. For anyone who's unfamiliar or doesn't remember what surveil is, that means we get to look at the top 4 cards of our library and put any number of them into our graveyard, and the rest on top of our library in any order. Additionally, when we do this, we may return target non-land permanent an opponent controls to its owner's hand. So for the investment of 6 mana, we get to flash in a big beater, we get to bounce a non-land permanent that our opponent controls, and we get to look at the top 4 cards of our library and set up our next draw or next several draws. Dream Eater does a lot of the things that blue is known for, and it definitely has a place with the Sphinxes in this portion of the deck. Speaking of places with Sphinxes, you knew we were only a matter of time until we had the Sphinx tribal leader, Unish, Cryosphinx Sovereign, 4/4 flyer for 4 and 2 blue mana. Spells we cast, Sphinx spells that we cast cost 2 less to cast. So getting Unish out into play early will allow us to get all of our other Sphinxes out ahead of curve and hopefully be enough to take over the game and overwhelm our opponents. Whenever Unish or another Sphinx we control enters the battlefield, we look at the top 4 cards of our library. We reveal the top 4 cards of our library. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. We put one into our hand and the other into our graveyard. This effect has a lot of versatility. If it's one of those situations where you are politicking with one of your opponents to help bring down somebody that has the table at siege, then Unish is going to definitely be an effect that your opponent will help to put into your hand the cards needed to bring that opponent down. All right, staying with the CMC of 6, it is our last one. It is another of our alternate win conditions. If you take into effect all of the numerous card draw abilities and effects that we're trying to establish in this deck, And remembering from our first installment that we're going to include many, many ways in which to keep cards in our hand in excess of 7 so that we don't discard them. Keep adding this Sphinx to this portion of the deck, staying on flavor and adding an alternate win condition with respect to the cards drawing is just aces in our book, and that is going to be a Tempsis All-Seeing. It's a 4/5 flyer for 3 and 3 blue mana. We can pay 2 and a blue, tap it, draw 2 cards, and then discard a card. Whenever a Tempsis All-Seeing deals damage to an opponent, we may reveal our hand. If cards with at least 6 different converted mana costs are revealed this way, that player loses the game. Again, we have already established a very deep pile of cards that are going to allow us to draw way more cards than we should. Later in this series, we're going to see many spells and effects that allow us to keep all of those cards in our hand. If a Tempsis can connect with some combat damage, it's going to be very easy for us to reveal 6 cards with different CMCs and knock that player right out of the game. All right, we're down to just a handful of Sphinxes here. We're up to a CMC of 7, and now we're going to talk about Scholar of the Lost Trove, a 5/5 flyer for 5 and 2 blue mana. When Scholar of the Lost Trove ETBs, we may cast target instant, sorcery, or artifact card from our graveyard without paying its mana cost. If an instant or sorcery spell is cast this way and is put into our graveyard, we exile it instead. So this is going to have a little outside the periphery synergy with what Eligeth is trying to accomplish with the scry into draw ability. We're going to have Scholar of the Lost Tree come down into play, and it's not necessarily going to result in us drawing cards off of its enter the battlefield effect, but when it does ETB, we're just going to locate one of those instant or sorcery cards in our graveyard that we've already cast and allow us to scry and draw those cards in the presence of Eligeth. All right, our second last Sphinx, another CMC of 7. It is Wind Reader Sphinx, 3/7 flying. Whenever a creature with flying attacks, we may draw a card. Please keep in mind and watch that text. Whenever a creature with flying, not a creature we control, not a creature an opponent controls, when any creature with flying attacks, we may draw a card. And as you've seen so far, every single creature in this video all have flying. So we might as well just equip that. We might as well just spread that static ability amongst all of the Sphinxes in this deck. All right, folks, MTG BC, our last Sphinx of the video. It's a mana value of 8, and it is Sphinx of the Second Sun, a 6/6 flyer for 6 and 2 blue mana. At the beginning of our post-combat main phase, we get an additional beginning phase after this phase. The beginning phase includes untap, upkeep, and the draw steps. So we're going to get to draw another card, and we're also going to make sure that if we have any at the beginning of your upkeep abilities, particularly some of the ones that say, scry something at the beginning of your upkeep, particularly if we have Eligeth in play, that's just going to put more cards into our hand because we're going to reap the benefits of having that additional untap, the additional upkeep, and the additional draw step. Sphinx of the Second Sun is a 6/6 flyer. Not only does it give us all of those additional phases, but boy oh boy can it act as a massive beater in the air. All right, MTG BC, there you have it. We've got 10 Sphinxes to the left that are going to have all kinds of synergies to what we're doing to the deck. And then in the presence of Eligeth, our commander, we have a draw-discard combo here that will allow us to draw our entire library. What will we do with the library when it's in our hand? Stay tuned for the next installment of this series to find out. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic.